3:17. I remember the time because I hadn't been sleeping. Not really. Just lying on the narrow cot in my assigned quarters, staring at the ceiling panels that hummed with recycled air and soft, artificial light. My hearing before the imperial court was only a few hours away, and every version of the future I ran through my head ended badly. Then my terminal chimed. One short tone. Priority flag. I sat up immediately. No one on my team used priority flags at this hour. No one could. Our comms were monitored, filtered, translated, scrubbed so clean that even urgency lost its teeth before it reached me. But this came through untouched. I swung my legs off the cot and crossed the room in 3 steps. The screen was already awake, displaying a single file. No sender, no origin stamp, no encryption signature, just a title. Do not translate. My first thought was that it was a trap. My second was that someone had just risked their entire existence to get this to me. I hesitated. Then I opened it. The text wasn't in standard imperial. It wasn't in any trade dialect either. It was old Karathi, dense, layered, full of legal structures designed to mean 3 things at once, and none of them clearly. Someone didn't want this read. Good thing I'd spent the last 2 weeks doing exactly that. As I scrolled, the shape of it started to form. Not a contract, an audit. Internal. Restricted. Cross-referencing clauses that weren't supposed to exist. My pulse slowed. Not from calm. From clarity. By the time I reached the end, my hands were steady. The hearing suddenly didn't matter the way I thought it did. Because now I knew what they were really offering. And what it would cost. I looked at the clock again. 3:17. Whoever sent this knew exactly when I'd need it. And exactly what I'd do with it. By the time I stepped into the grand convocation hall, I already knew how it would end. Not the outcome, not the verdict, but the moment. The moment everything would break. The hall was designed for intimidation. It wasn't subtle about it. The ceiling arched impossibly high, lined with bioluminescent veins that pulsed like a living organism. Every surface reflected light in a way that made you feel exposed, reduced, observed from angles you couldn't even see. And at the center of it all, raised above everyone, stood her, Empress Adrienne Valak. She didn't move when I entered. She didn't need to. The entire room bent around her presence like gravity had decided to take a different shape. Delegates from a dozen systems filled the tiers. Some leaned forward, curious. Others leaned back, already dismissive. To them, I was a formality. A minor species representative about to accept terms he didn't fully understand. That was the assumption. I walked into the petitioner's circle and stopped exactly where I was supposed to. The markings on the floor glowed faintly under my boots, locking me into position like a piece on a board. Ryan Hale, the arbiter announced, voice amplified through the chamber without visible source. Representative of Earth's Interstellar Division, you stand before the sovereign authority of the Valak Imperium. A pause. Then, the Empress extends to your species a bond contract. Do you accept the terms as presented? Everything in the room leaned toward that question. I could feel it. Expectation. Pressure. History. The file from 3:17 burned in the back of my mind. 600 pages of language designed to hide one truth. Not partnership. Control. I lifted my head and looked directly at her. Not at the dais. Not at the symbols. At her. She was watching me already. Composed. Still. Patient. Waiting for the answer she had heard 1,000 times before from 1,000 different worlds. Yes. That was how it always went. That was how it was supposed to go. I took a breath. Then I said it. No. The word didn't echo. It didn't need to. It landed hard enough on its own. For a second, nothing moved. Then the chamber reacted all at once. A ripple of sound. Not loud, but sharp. Disbelief. Confusion. Something closer to offense than shock. Conversations started in whispers that weren't supposed to exist in a room like this. The arbiter froze. One of the council members shifted visibly, as if something fundamental had just slipped out of place. But the Empress didn't react. Clarify, she said. One word. Calm. Controlled. Not a request. I swallowed once, then stepped forward half a pace, just enough to break the perfect symmetry of the circle. I refused the bond contract, I said, my voice steady. In its current form, it is not an alliance. A pause. Then I finished it. It's a control mechanism. That one hit harder. The whispers stopped. Completely. Now it was silence again, but not the same kind as before. This silence had edges. The arbiter's gaze snapped toward me, sharp and cutting. "You will choose your words with caution, Representative." "I am," I said. My heart was hammering, but it didn't matter. Fear was just noise. I'd learned that a long time ago. "You are accusing the Imperium of bad faith." Another voice cut in. One of the council members, older, colder. "Do you understand the weight of that claim?" "I do." I kept my eyes on the Empress. "Do you?" That was the wrong move. I knew it the second I said it. The room tightened. Several delegates shifted, some leaning forward now not with curiosity, but with anticipation, waiting for the correction, the punishment, the moment I'd be reminded exactly where I stood. But she didn't interrupt. She didn't shut me down. She just watched. That was worse, because it meant I had permission to keep going. And now I couldn't stop. "The contract requires a human representative to undergo biological and neurological modification," I said. "Permanent integration into imperial systems. Loss of independent cognitive authority in matters defined as shared interest." I could feel the weight of every word as it landed. Translated, I continued, "That means control over thought, response, and decision-making." A sharp intake of breath somewhere in the chamber. I didn't look. I kept going. "That's not partnership," I said. "That's ownership." The silence after that was absolute. No whispers. No movement. Nothing. Even the ambient hum of the chamber seemed to fade. I realized then, this wasn't just unexpected. It was impossible. No one said this. Not here. Not to her. Not ever. The Empress stepped down from the dais. Just one step. But it changed everything. The entire room shifted with her movement, like the structure itself had to adjust to accommodate it. She was closer now. Not physically threatening. But the distance between us no longer felt safe. "You speak," she said slowly, "as though you understand the full scope of what is offered." "I do." "You have read the contract." "Yes." A pause. Then, "In its original form?" That question cut deeper than anything else. My chest tightened slightly. There it was. 317. I held her gaze. "Yes." For the first time since I entered the hall, something changed in her expression. Not anger. Not yet. Something sharper. Interest. Behind me, I heard movement. The council. They hadn't expected that answer. Good. Because neither had I, until a few hours ago. "I refuse to kneel," I said, my voice quieter now, but somehow heavier. Not for terms that were never meant to be seen. That did it. The silence broke again, but this time, it wasn't confusion. It was tension. Real, dangerous tension. Because now it wasn't just defiance. Now it was exposure. And everyone in that room knew. Something had just gone very, very wrong. If you've watched this far, then this story is really interesting to you. Please confirm it by clicking like under this video. It doesn't cost you anything, but it will help me understand what story to publish for you next. Let's move on. I expected guards. I expected a summons, a formal reprimand, maybe even a quiet removal before the situation escalated further. That would have been the clean way to handle it. Instead, I got silence. 3 hours of it. No messages. No directives. No one knocking on my door. Just the low hum of the ventilation system and the faint afterimage of that moment replaying in my head. Her stepping down, asking me if I'd read the contract in its original form. She had known. Not everything. Not yet. But enough to understand that something had slipped past her. And that meant the real problem wasn't me. It was whoever had written the contract. I was halfway through rereading the audit file when the door opened. No warning. No chime. Just open. I was on my feet before I even realized I'd moved. She stood in the doorway. Empress Adrienne Valek. Alone. No council. No guards. No ceremonial presence. Just her, framed by the dim corridor light, wearing a simpler version of the robes she had worn in court. Dark, layered, but without the weight of authority stitched into every line. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she stepped inside, and the door closed behind her with a soft, final sound. "You read it," she said. Not a question. Her voice was different here. Lower. Stripped of projection. Still controlled, but no longer meant for an audience. "Yes," I said. She studied me. Not the way she had in court. Not like an empress assessing a subject. This was sharper. Focused. Like she was trying to take something apart and understand how it worked. "Show me." I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to. Because the moment I did, there was no going back. If she saw what was in that file, if she understood what her own counsel had done, this wouldn't stay contained. It would spread. Through the court. Through the Imperium. Through every system that depended on the illusion that everything was exactly as it should be. You're not supposed to have this, I said. Neither were you. That landed harder than I expected. I exhaled slowly, then turned the terminal toward her. She moved closer. Close enough that I could see the fine details in her expression, the precision of her features, the way her eyes tracked the text with unnatural speed, absorbing structure and meaning in layers. Minutes passed. She didn't interrupt, didn't react, just read. Then she stopped, scrolled back, read it again, slower this time. When she finally looked up, something had changed. Not visibly, but I felt it, like the room had shifted pressure. These sections, she said, her voice quieter now, were not presented during council review. I figured. They are embedded within subclauses of adaptive interpretation protocols, she continued, almost to herself. That requires cross-referencing internal legal frameworks that are not accessible to external delegates. Meaning? Her eyes snapped back to mine. Meaning, she said, they were hidden. There it was. Not suspicion, not theory, confirmation. I leaned back slightly against the edge of the desk, watching her process it. Not just from us, I said. From you. She didn't answer immediately. Her gaze returned to the screen, but she wasn't reading anymore. She was thinking, reconstructing, tracing the chain of authority backward. Vale, she said finally. The name came out like a conclusion, not a guess. Council lead, I said. Draft authority. Oversight on contract formation. Yes. No hesitation, which meant she already knew what that implied. Silence settled between us again, but it was different now. Not empty. Charged. Because now we were both standing in the same place. On the same side of something that was about to get very dangerous. You said something in the hall, she said after a moment. I didn't respond. You said the terms were never meant to be seen. Her gaze lifted again. Explain that. I considered lying. Just enough to soften it. To keep things controlled. To avoid pushing this further than it already had gone. But that wasn't why she was here. And it wasn't why I had said no. Because if they were, I said, you would have rejected them. A pause. Then. And they knew that. That one hit. I saw it. A flicker. Not of anger. Of realization. Slow. Precise. Unavoidable. They expected compliance, she said. From us, I replied. And from you. Her posture shifted slightly. Subtle, but not insignificant. They overstepped. Yeah, I said. They did. Another silence. Then she stepped closer. Not toward the terminal. Toward me. You understand what this means, she said. It wasn't a warning. It was a statement. Yeah, I said. If this is exposed, she continued, it will not be contained to a contract dispute. It will become a challenge to council authority. I figured that too. And you, she said, her voice tightening just slightly, will be at the center of it. I met her gaze. I already am. That almost made her smile. Almost. Then it was gone. Replaced by something else. Something sharper. More focused. You refused to kneel, she said quietly. I did. You challenged the contract in open court. Yeah. And now, she said, her voice dropping just enough to make the words feel heavier. You're holding proof that my own council attempted to alter the structure of an imperial bond without my knowledge. I didn't respond, because there was nothing to add. She studied me for a long moment. Then, you realize what they'll do if this becomes public. It wasn't a question. They'll try to discredit me first, I said. Then isolate me. Then remove me. A pause. And if that doesn't work, I added, they'll escalate. Her eyes didn't leave mine. Correct. Another silence. Then she said it. Quiet. Precise. And yet you're still here. I let out a breath. Yeah, I said. I am. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she reached out. Not to the terminal, not to the file, but to the edge of the desk, steadying herself slightly. It was small. Almost nothing. But it told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't seen this coming. Not like this. Not from inside her own system. Why show me this? She asked. That was the wrong question. Or maybe the right one. Because you're the only one who can stop it, I said. Her expression didn't change. But something behind it did. And if I don't, I held her gaze. Then they win. The words hung there. Heavy. Final. Because now it wasn't about a contract anymore. It was about control. About who actually held it. And who was about to lose it. The backlash didn't start loud. It started quiet. That was how I knew it was real. No official statements. No public condemnation. No dramatic gestures from the council. Just small shifts, subtle, controlled, deliberate. My access credentials were downgraded. Not revoked. That would have been obvious. Just adjusted. Certain corridors no longer opened for me. Certain data channels returned, restricted, where they hadn't before. Meetings I was scheduled to attend were suddenly rescheduled. Without new times. People who had spoken to me the day before now avoided eye contact. It was clean, professional, efficient. They were isolating me. I sat in my quarters, watching it happen in real time, and realized something else. They were moving faster than I expected, which meant they already knew something had leaked. Not what, not how much, but enough. The terminal chimed again. This time it wasn't subtle. A formal summons. Imperial review hearing. Contract clarification session. That wasn't a real title. That was a cover. They weren't clarifying anything. They were containing it. I stood there for a moment, staring at the message, then pulled up the audit file again. 317. I'd read it 6 times by now. I knew where everything was. Every hidden clause. Every cross-reference. Every line that wasn't supposed to exist. But something kept pulling my attention back to the structure. Not the content. The way it was built. It wasn't just hidden. It was layered. Deliberately. Like whoever wrote it expected someone, eventually, to find it. And wanted them to understand it. That didn't fit. People who bury things like this don't leave trails. They erase them. Which meant, this wasn't just a leak. It was a message. I exhaled slowly and closed the file. Then I left the room. The Hall of Reckonings felt different from the Convocation Hall. Smaller, tighter, designed less for spectacle and more for pressure. The seating curved inward, forcing attention toward the center, toward the person standing there. Me. The council was already assembled. Vale stood at the front. Calm, controlled, untouched. If he knew anything had slipped past him, he wasn't showing it. Good. That meant I still had leverage. The arbiter's voice cut through the room. This session has been called to address discrepancies in the interpretation of the bond contract offered to the human delegation. Discrepancies. Right. Vale stepped forward. Representative Hale, he said, his tone smooth, measured. It has come to our attention that you have raised concerns regarding the structure of the agreement. Yeah, I said. That's one way to put it. A ripple moved through the chamber. He ignored it. As the authorizing authority behind the contract, he continued, I am prepared to clarify any misunderstandings. Misunderstandings? I almost smiled. You didn't misunderstand anything, I said. Now the room tightened. Vale's gaze sharpened, just slightly. Then perhaps, he said, you would care to explain the basis of your objections. There it was. The invitation. Carefully worded. Perfectly controlled. Say it. But say it wrong, and it disappears. I stepped forward into the center. Every eye on me. Every system in that room recording. Your contract, I said, contains provisions for neurological integration that were not disclosed during presentation. A pause. Vale didn't react. Incorrect, he said calmly. All relevant provisions were included in the distributed documentation. Not all of them, I said. And you are certain of this? Yeah. Silence. He tilted his head slightly. Then I would advise caution, he said. Making claims of concealed clauses without evidence is a serious accusation. There it was. The trap. If I couldn't prove it cleanly, right now, this would flip. Fast. I could feel it. The room leaning again. Waiting. Not for truth. For resolution. I reached into the terminal interface embedded in the chamber floor. And hesitated. Just for a second. Because once I did this, there was no pulling it back. Not from the council. Not from the Imperium. Not from anyone. 317. The file wasn't just evidence. It was a weapon, and I was about to use it. I brought it up. Not all of it. Just fragments. Enough. The screen behind me shifted. Lines of text appeared. Old Karathi, dense and layered, cross-referenced with highlighted sections that didn't exist in the official version. A murmur moved through the chamber. This time, Vale reacted. Just a fraction. But I saw it. Recognition. You embedded them here, I said, pointing to one of the sections. Subclause integration protocols. Hidden behind adaptive interpretation structures. The murmurs grew louder. You buried it deep enough that external delegates wouldn't find it, I continued. And complex enough that most of the court wouldn't bother looking. I turned to face him fully. But someone did. That landed. Hard. Because now it wasn't just about the contract. Now it was about exposure. About failure. Vale stepped forward. Partial excerpts, he said sharply. Taken out of context. Misinterpreted. They weren't misinterpreted. I cut in. The room went still again. Because I wasn't supposed to interrupt him. I didn't care. They were hidden, I said. And you know it. His composure cracked. Just enough. You are presenting unauthorized material, he said. This violates. What it violates, I said, is your ability to pretend this doesn't exist. Silence. Absolute. For a second, no one moved. Then, is this accurate? The voice came from above. I looked up. Adrienne Volek. She had entered without announcement, without ceremony, and now she was standing at the edge of the chamber, looking directly at Vale. Not at me. At him. The entire room shifted. Vale straightened immediately. Your ascendancy, he said, controlled again, but tighter now. These are incomplete. I did not ask if they were complete, she said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I asked if they were accurate. That was it. That was the moment. Because now it wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about humanity. It was about her. And whether she had been lied to. Vale held her gaze. For a second. Two. Then. They are, he said. The chamber broke. Not loudly. Not violently. But you could feel it. The shift. The fracture. Because the truth wasn't just spoken. It was confirmed. And now it couldn't be contained. I stood there, heart steady, watching it happen, and realized something else. This was only the beginning. Because now the real fight wasn't about proving it. It was about what came next. The silence after Vale's admission didn't feel like victory. It felt like a vacuum. Everything that had been carefully balanced inside that chamber, authority, hierarchy, certainty, collapsed inward all at once, leaving something unstable in its place. No one spoke. No one moved. Because no one knew what the rules were anymore. I stood in the center of the floor, the fragments of the audit file still projected behind me, and for the first time since 03:17, I felt it. Not fear. Not exactly. Wait. Because exposing the truth was one thing. Controlling what it turned into was something else entirely. Explain. The word came from above. I looked up. Adrienne Volek had stepped further into the chamber now, no longer at the edge. She didn't descend fully. Not yet, but she didn't need to. Her presence cut through the room like a line no one could cross. Her eyes were still on Vale. Explain, she repeated. There was no anger in her voice. That made it worse. Vale didn't hesitate. They are structural safeguards, he said, designed to ensure stability within a cross-species bond. Without integration, the probability of misalignment. You altered the contract, she said, cutting through him cleanly. A pause. Yes. You concealed those alterations. Another pause. Yes. From the human delegation. Yes. She took one step down. And from me. That one hung. Longer than the others. Because now it wasn't just procedural. It was personal. Vale didn't answer immediately. For the first time, I saw it clearly. Not uncertainty. Calculation. How far he could go. What he could admit. What he could still control. Then, yes. There it was. Complete. Unavoidable. The chamber reacted again, but differently this time. Not confusion. Not shock. Division. Some of the council shifted visibly. Others stayed perfectly still, as if refusing to acknowledge what had just been said. Because acknowledging it meant choosing a side. And no one wanted to be the first. I exhaled slowly and stepped forward. Those safeguards would have rewritten a human mind, I said. Permanently. Stripped autonomy, rerouted decision-making, enforced compliance through neural dependency. No one interrupted me. Not even the arbiter. That's not alignment, I continued. That's control. Vale's gaze snapped toward me. You interpret from a limited biological framework, he said. Integration is not subjugation, it is optimization. It eliminates the individual, I said. It eliminates conflict. It eliminates choice. And in doing so, he replied, his voice tightening, it creates stability. There it was. Not denial. Justification. That was worse. I turned, slowly, making sure the entire chamber could hear me. He didn't design it to hurt anyone, I said. He designed it to work. That landed. Because it reframed everything. This wasn't cruelty. It was efficiency. And that made it far more dangerous. I looked back at Adrienne. He would have done the same thing to you, I said. The room froze again. Not because of me. because of what that implied. Vale didn't deny it. He didn't even try. Instead, he said something else. Control ensures continuity, he said. Without it, systems fracture. Alliances fail. Empires collapse. And with it, I said, they rot. That one cut deeper than anything else I'd said. Because it wasn't about the contract anymore. It was about the Imperium itself. Adrienne descended the final step. Now she was on the same level as the rest of us. That had never happened before. I could feel it. Even the architecture of the room seemed to hesitate. You acted without authority, she said. Vale met her gaze. I acted in the best interest of the Imperium. You acted without my knowledge. I acted where knowledge would have delayed necessary action. A pause. Then, you bypassed me. Yes. The word echoed. Soft. Final. And in that moment, something shifted again. Not in the room. In her. I saw it. Clearer than before. The realization wasn't new. But the acceptance of it was. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't miscommunication. This was a system that had learned how to move around her. And if it could move around her, then she didn't control it. Not fully. She turned slightly, just enough to address the chamber. The original contract is void, she said. No hesitation. No consultation. Just a decision. Murmurs broke out instantly, this time louder, sharper, harder to contain. You do not have unilateral authority to. One of the council members started. I am the authority, she said. Silence. Immediate. Absolute. The terms presented were altered without sovereign approval, she continued. They are invalid. Her gaze swept across the chamber. And they will be replaced. That changed everything. Because now it wasn't about damage control. Now it was about reconstruction. Vale didn't move. But I saw it again, that calculation. Faster this time. More precise. You intend to rewrite the contract, he said. I do. Without council oversight. A pause. Yes. That was the real line. The one that mattered. Because now it wasn't just about what he had done. It was about what she was about to do. Break protocol. Break precedent. Break the system that had allowed this to happen in the first place. And everyone in that room knew. That came with consequences. Severe ones. Vale straightened. You will face challenge, he said. I expect it. You will be accused of destabilizing the Imperium. Then they will have to prove that stability requires deception. That ended it. There was nothing left to argue. Not here. Not now. The battle had shifted. Away from evidence. Toward power. Toward authority. Toward who actually decided what the Imperium was allowed to be. I stood there, watching it unfold, and felt something settle in my chest. Clarity. Because now I understood the real cost. Not just for her. For me. I had forced this into the open. I had broken the balance. And now, there was no version of this where I walked away untouched. I met Vale's gaze one last time. He didn't look angry. He looked certain, like he had already moved past this moment. Already planning the next one. That was when I understood. This wasn't over. Not even close. It had just begun. The next session wasn't called a trial. It was called a convocation of protocol breach. That told me everything I needed to know. They weren't attacking the truth. They were attacking the process. Because if they could prove Adrienne had broken protocol, if they could reframe this as her failure instead of theirs, then the contract, the evidence, everything I'd exposed, it all became irrelevant. Procedure over truth. It was cleaner that way. Safer. For them. The Hall of Reckonings was full again. More than before. Word had spread. Not just within the court, across the Imperium. Delegates from systems that had no stake in the contract had shown up anyway, drawn by the same instinct that pulls people toward collapsing structures. They wanted to see if it would fall. I stood in the petitioner's position again. Same place. Different weight. This time, I wasn't just a representative. I was the problem. Vale stood at the center of the chamber, armored in full ceremonial command attire. Not for war. For authority. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about her. The sovereign, he began, his voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber, has violated the doctrine of mediated governance. The words rolled out clean, structured, precise. She engaged in direct negotiation with a foreign representative without council mediation. She drafted and authorized a revised contract independently. She bypassed established review protocols that have governed this Imperium for over 5,000 cycles. Murmurs followed. Not loud, but steady, building. These actions, he continued, are not deviations. They are breaches. And breaches, if left unchallenged, erode the foundation upon which authority rests. I watched the chamber, not the speakers, the reactions. Some were already nodding. Others stayed still. But no one dismissed him, because he wasn't wrong. That was the problem. He turned slightly, not toward me, toward Adrienne. She sat above, composed, still, exactly as she had been before. But I knew better now. I knew what it cost her to sit like that. To preserve the integrity of the Imperium, Vale said, I call for corrective review. There it was. Not removal. Not yet. But close. Close enough that everyone in that room understood where this could go. If he pushed it. If they allowed it. I stepped forward. Then let's review it, I said. That broke the rhythm. Just enough. The arbiter turned toward me, clearly irritated. You will speak when recognized. You already recognized me, I said. Contract dispute. Named party. A pause. Then, proceed. I moved into the center of the floor. Slow. Deliberate. I could feel the attention shift again. Not fully, but enough. You're right, I said, looking directly at Vale. She broke protocol. That got their attention, because it wasn't what they expected. You're right, I repeated. She bypassed mediation. She rewrote the contract. She stepped outside the structure that's supposed to control how this system works. I turned, addressing the chamber. All of that is true. Silence. Sharp. Focused. Then I took a breath. And none of it matters. That hit harder than anything else. Because now I wasn't arguing details. I was rejecting the framework. Vale's eyes narrowed. Explain, he said. I almost smiled. I will. I turned fully, making sure every section of the chamber could see me. You've spent this entire session talking about how she broke the rules, I said. But you haven't said a single thing about why she did it. No one interrupted. Because now they were listening. Really listening. The original contract, I continued, contained concealed provisions for neurological alteration. Permanent. Irreversible. Designed to remove autonomy from the human representative. A shift in the chamber. Subtle. But there. She didn't bypass protocol because she felt like it. I said. She did it because the system you're defending failed. That landed. Hard. I could see it. Not agreement. But hesitation. And hesitation was enough. I turned back to Vale. You talk about structure, I said. About stability. About preservation. A step closer. But what exactly are you preserving? He didn't answer. So I did. A system where critical information can be hidden from the sovereign. Another step. Where contracts are altered without disclosure. Another. Where the only way to correct it is to break the very rules you're now using as a weapon. The chamber went still again. Because now the argument wasn't abstract. It was specific. And they all knew it. I stopped in the center. That's not stability, I said. That's a flaw. Vale's voice cut through, sharper now. It is a controlled system, he said. Designed to function beyond the limitations of individual perception. Designed to function without accountability, I replied. A pause. Then, you're not protecting the Imperium, I said. You're protecting your version of it. That one hit. Not just him. The room. Because now they had to decide. Was this about preserving order? Or preserving control? I turned, looking up at Adrienne. You didn't break the system, I said. You exposed it. For a second. Just a second. Everything held. Balanced. On the edge of something irreversible. Then the arbiter spoke. The convocation will deliberate. The words dropped like a final seal. No more arguments. No more speeches. Now it was out of our hands. They removed me from the chamber. Not roughly. Not aggressively. Just efficiently. I ended up in a waiting room adjacent to the hall. No windows. No access. Just a single chair and a door that didn't open from the inside. Containment. I sat there, hands steady, staring at nothing. Minutes passed. Or hours. Hard to tell. Then the door opened. I looked up. Vale. Alone. Again. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. For a moment, he just stood there, watching me. Then he spoke. You understand, he said, that you've made yourself a target. Yeah, I said. He nodded once. Good. That wasn't what I expected. I didn't come here to threaten you, he continued. If I wanted that, it would already be done. I said nothing. Because I believed him. You exposed a flaw, he said. In the system. In me. A pause. I won't forget that. That's supposed to be reassuring? I asked. No, he said. It's supposed to be accurate. Another silence. Then, if the ruling goes against her, he said, this ends differently. How differently? He met my gaze. You don't leave this station. No emotion, no emphasis, just fact. I held his stare. And if it goes her way, a slight shift, almost imperceptible, then the Imperium changes. He turned toward the door, paused, then added, you should hope it does. He left. The door closed, and I was alone again, waiting for a decision that was going to decide a lot more than a contract. The doors opened. The convocation has ruled, the arbiter said. The sovereign's actions constitute a procedural violation, not a constitutional breach. The revised contract stands. I didn't move. For a second, I just stood there, letting it settle. We didn't lose. That alone felt unreal. Adrienne stepped down from the chamber above, ignoring the council, ignoring the protocols that still tried to hold her in place. She walked straight toward me. No hesitation, no distance. She stopped in front of me and held my gaze. You refuse to kneel? She said quietly. Yeah. A pause. Good. Then she reached out and took my hand. Not symbolic, not political, real. Around us, the court watched in silence, unsure what rules still applied. 3 days later, the new alliance was signed. Clean terms. No hidden clauses. No control. But the cost came fast. Access restrictions. Surveillance. Quiet threats that never had a sender. I wasn't removed. I was marked. Weeks later, I found the origin of the audit file. A single internal note. No name. No identity. Just a trace. Someone inside had seen it and decided the truth mattered more than the system. I never found out who, but I understood why. Because that night at 3:17, they didn't just send me a file. They chose a side. And now so had we. Not built on control, not on fear, but on one decision. Refuse. And don't kneel. Thank you for listening to this story to the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Write in the comments what moment in this story impressed you the most. And also check out the other videos that just appeared on your screen. See you in the next video.